Ya Allah, assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thanks, guys, for getting this ball started. Just a correction, and this is for myself. We were talking in the last minute, we were talking about the mad and the connection. It's a exceptional circumstance in Hafs. We're talking about Alif Lam Mim. And when you continue it, I actually said it incorrectly. It's supposed to be Alif, oh, that's Alif Lam Mim Allah. What happens is that we talked about the role of the two, التقاء الساكنين, or when you have two sukoons next to each other. So what happens, as we said, you've got two options. If it's the letter has a six harakat mad, as in the case with meme, you say it. But if you link it, when you link it, you'll have a kasra, a fatha on the meme, and then it joins to the next word. So obviously, that's a mistake from my side, but I had to highlight this apart from correcting a mistake, because this is probably why you probably hear a lot of Qur'an, they try to do two ijazat, maybe three if they can, the more the better at once, because it helps expose some of their mistakes and catches, bad habits they might have not corrected from the first sheikh. Other sheikhs probably are more onto it with regards to picking things up. But as you can see, if you're qualified to talk about something, you're guaranteed to make a mistake at the end of the day. So you can imagine how messy it is if you're talking about things that you don't, understand in some situations. So that's a correction from my end. Just trying to double check what else we covered from the last lessons. Almost I'm going through the book now. We stopped roughly around, oh yes, so just to quickly recap what we covered last week. We covered al-imala. So we said the word imala in Hafs is written as Bismillahi majraha, but it's pronounced as majreha. This only happens once in Hafs and an entire recitation. You don't have to worry about it. Other qira'at, it happens more frequently. This is denoted either by a dot below the letter or a diamond-shaped symbol that you'll see on the word. Any questions about imala so far? This seems pretty straightforward. You guys are all good?
Yep, all good.
All good,
Perfect.
alhamdulillah.
Inshallah. So now, just let me know if somebody wants to slow me down or we start reading from somewhere else. Here in page 190, talking about the accent in reciting the whole glorious Quran. I'm going to blurb really quickly. I'm going to cover and read it, and then give you a simple rule explaining what it means. So here the Sheikh talks about accent. Accentation here is talked as an-nabr. Is an old and new topic. It is old in respect to the subject and is new regarding the naming of it. So basically what he means is that the definition has been coined recently, but it's a very old subject, but it wasn't referred to explicitly. The ulama, in my personal opinion, having investigated this, is that they felt that they gave this new definition and they started teaching it because just to try to quantify, what it actually is talking about. My understanding is that, because of how the old generations, mashallah, were quite onto it and receptive and well versed in the Arabic language, they picked it up automatically from the Salaf and the early generations. But as Islam spread onwards, it spread to different places. You had different ways of understanding Arabic. The later generations, and this is not a bid'ah, by the way, the later generations felt the need that they had to conceptualize this thing to help with facilitating and the ease of teaching. For example, just like how today we have diagrams to help us understand the anatomy and if explaining phonetics and non-Arabs. There's nothing wrong with it. That's not seen as a bid'ah. That is a tool that is used to help explain qira'at to make people understand it. Same thing with the mutun. At the end of the day, the mutun were introduced by Imam al-Jazari. That was 800 years after the Hijrah. When you think about it, these things are not fard. They might seem like a bid'ah to some people, but they're actually here to help the reciter recite. It's not like we're introducing anything new to the Qur'an. The Qur'an is exactly the same. It's just we're coining different terms to explain things to different Qur'an. So it's That's basically it. So that's what he means about accentation. So here quickly, naming the method of presenting it, Makki ibn Abi Talib al-Qaisi, 437 Hijri. This is a really well-known Imam. This was the predecessor, or you could say the Imam before Imam al-Shatibi. And he had a lot of influence on Tajweed, especially the 7 compilations that came by Imam al-Shatibi. Mentioned a number of issues regarding this topic. His famous work is known as Al-Ri'ayah. You're not required to look into this work, but this is more on an advanced level after Ijazah. But we had to mention here for credit for the Sheikh. He calls the Nabr the chapter of stretched letters. And what follows, as did several other Imams of Tajweed in their compilation. For pronunciation purposes, I have traced the topics of a Nabr in the compilations which reached me. This is Dr. Ayman Sweid talking. And from what I've received from my revered Sheikh, and I've split them into 5 topics. So here basically, An-Nabr, Dr. Ayman Sweid, has compiled a lot of old books in Tajweed. He's gone to the actual sources of the book, so this isn't anything he's making up. He's classifies Nabr into 5 considerations. So here, let's look at the first example. The first one, stopping on a letter on Shadda. So I'll recite this, and you guys can tell me what's wrong with it. If I happen to stop on these words, what's the difference between al-hay and al-hayy?
The second
One of them is.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think the second one has more shad in it.
Yes. Now what? Now why did I do that?
Because there was sukoon. You put a sukoon where there was a shad. So you had to make it more prominent.
Yes. So here, why am I making it more prominent?
Is it because you have two sukoons meeting because the shadda is representing 2 letters?
Not necessarily 2 sukoons meeting, because here, let's look at, let's use technical terminology. So al-asl, originally, what was it? Al-asl, what's in foundation speak? What is it? The haraka of that letter.
One is a shadda. One is a sukoon, sorry.
Yeah, so let's look at that from our asl perspective. Asl means here, it means the untouched text that's written. Because think of it this way, as we said in the first classes, mashallah, we've received the Quran that we have today was actually transmitted orally and written. So what happened when it got passed in the written form, we actually have the written manuscripts that were written, mashallah, at the time of Rasul on, parchment, shoulder blades of camels, these things, yeah? So when it got given to us in that original form, this is what we mean by asl. Asl means original. So originally, and when harakat weren't written there, but just to make it clearer, these masahif, when you look at it, when I say what's the asl, I mean what's in actual ink that I'm looking at. So is it the shadda or is it the sukoon? You can take a guess, it's 50-50.
It's the sukoon?
Oh, it's the shadda. Because when you look at it here, when you're looking at the book, it says al-hayy, huwa al-hayyu la ilaha. You see what I mean? So that's the ayah in full. So the shadda is what we're looking at. But here, when we stop at it, why do we stop at it with a sukoon?
Because that's the rule. That's how they used to recite it, is it? When they would put a sukoon?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. When you start reading, you go Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. You don't say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, because that's how Arabs talk. So what happens? The asl in this situation, when the Imam is talking about accents or nabr, al asl in ink is shadda. ولا الضالين, for example. So here you'll see there's a shadda, but if you stop on the shadda, you'll have two conflicting opinions. Because what happens is it has to be a sukoon. So if somebody is listening and you're narrating the mushaf to somebody, as it happened literally, letter by letter, haraka by haraka, mashallah, by Abu Aswad Du'ali, roughly around, let's just say 50 Hijri, around that time, where he was spelling it out and they were introducing dots to the Arabic alphabet, and he was spelling it to his scribe. He had to spell it in such a way that he had to write the harakat or the asl. So if the person knew what to read when they were making wasl or continuing the recitation or stopping. So what happens, the asl of this thing is a shadda. You start getting a conflict when the shadda, you stop on it, you make a sukoon. So what we tend to do, this is where nabr comes in handy. Because every single time if I say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, that is got a sukoon. So what happens, I have to make it as a qalqala. But here, if you're stopping on a shadda, what we intentionally do to tell the reciter, هُوَ الْحَيِّ, or let's just say, وَبَثَّ فِيهَا مِنْ كُلِّ دَابَّةٍ. If I had to stop, I'll say, وَبَث. So what happens, I stopped, I'm writing a shadda. I know, rather than saying bath, I'll say bath. So I'm differentiating, look, this is not a sukoon in asl, but asl, the original, is a shadda. So it means if I continue, it's going to be something else. And then the sheikh reads again, وَبَثَّ فِيهَا مِنْ كُلِّ دَابَّةٍ. So what happens, he writes, is it a fatha on top of the shadda, a kasra below the shadda, or a dhamm? And that's how it happens. So does that clarify what nabr is? Any questions with regards to that?
Yes, it does clarify. Just when we're talking about the asl, the shaddas weren't written though in the original parchments and the shoulder blades, etc. Were they?
No, they weren't written in the original ones.
So then when we say we're going back to the asl, when we're going back to those things, we're actually with two letters, say if the letter with the shadda was a jim, would there be two jims written next to each other?
Well, the thing is, there weren't, as we know from what got passed down to us, there weren't two jims written down to us. We only had, like for example, al-hajj, where there wasn't written as hajj. Because think of it this way, because when you got another ayah in the Quran, when Sayyidina Musa was talking, obviously when he got married and he moved over to Madian, is what does the ayah say? على أن تأجرني إيش ثمانية حجج. So now you've got two jims. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I see. Jazakallah khair. Shukran.
So here, when you think about it, now this is where it gets, and mashallah, what you mentioned is actually a valid point. How did the Sahaba know, even though when they received the original manuscripts, mashallah, written at the time of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and this is where the miracle of the Quran comes in, how were they able to differentiate between al-hajj and hijaj, when in fact, it's like, it should actually raise more questions, because shouldn't it mean that by the time the Mus'haf got taken, from the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Uthman, this was actually the best time to add things to it, or even, ma'adallah, screw it up completely, because that's when you make mistakes. You don't make mistakes before compilation, you tend to make them after compilation. As you're aware, this is exactly what happened with other books, such as the Bible. And that's when people start splitting. Am I correct?
No.
So subhanAllah, this is what I argued as part of one of my master's research papers that I ended up doing for my course, was that the best time to have an uprising would have been when Sayyidina Uthman compiled the Masahif and, as we know, burnt all the other Masahif. When you think about it historically, if the Quran was incorrect and people were saying broke off into different sects and whatnot, there at least should have been a civil war, just like how it happened with Europe and the Great Schism between the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic Church. Am I correct?
Subhanallah, great point. Yep.
But subhanallah, there is nothing recorded historically in Arabic texts, including Western critics and people hating on the Mus'haf that a war broke out, or even, hang on, Sayyidina Uthman burnt the Musahif, clearly he's hiding something. In fact, Sayyidina Ali stood up and he said this was done on the ijma' of the Sahaba who were compiled. And this is from the Qur'an and the Sahaba Medina at that time. Because when you think about it, people outside of Medina didn't know what was going on. They didn't witness it. If you saw a Mus'haf burning today because of on the news, you'd go crazy, am I right? Because, you're going to get emotional. But subhanAllah, the Mus'hafs were burnt and the Muslims stayed together. So mashallah, when you think about it at the end of the day, it's the efforts, combined efforts, mashallah, of the Qur'an and the Kutab, because part of what we did, it wasn't just to memorize. It's not about being a hafiz. These people memorized it for the sake of writing it down. They were passing down a tradition, not words. It was wahi. That's the level of dedication they had to it. That's why when if they were able to recite it and spell it out to the person and tell them how to pronounce it, this is what we call a true hafiz of the Quran, because you're protecting the Quran. You're not just somebody sits down and go, Alhamdulillah, and just reads whatever and goes, Alhamdulillah, we finished the Mus'haf at the end of it, like we do today. These guys actually thought about every single harakah and protected it to pass it on today, because we could have easily screwed this up. So the question I ask you guys is that this is part of the ijaz of the Quran. Dots were introduced 54 years after the Hijrah. So how the heck could it happen that after dotting every single letter, 6,200, we're talking plus 6,000 verses, endless letters, we could have easily made a mistake in any of those, but mashallah, we actually consistently got the same level of pronunciation. You see what I mean? Sorry for getting too emotionally dragged on in this thing, but subhanAllah, it's like you can see we can easily get sidetracked about the simplest thing, such as the sukoon. Even how we stop. Everything's calculated. And just doing your ijazah isn't necessarily, you're not going to sit down and, people say, oh, I'll just do my ijazah in front of a sheikh. I'll just read the Quran from, Al-Fatiha to An-Nas. I usually tell them, good luck. It is that difficult. So I hope that explained it with regards to what's happening there. So to answer your question, bro, they didn't write two letters because they'll confuse it with the actual script. Not only will it conflict with the original manuscripts that were written at the time of Rasul, as we said, part of getting your ijazah is your tilawa has to be in line with the arkan al-tilawa, which is the pillars of recitation, which is the language of the Arabs, the isnad, and Muhammad. Just escaped me, it's not on the mind. Stuff like that. Oh yeah, it has to match the Uthmani script of the font as well. So it's so when you look at the language of the Arabs, this made sense to the Arabs. Under no condition they're going to say huwa al-hayy. You see what I mean? It's the hayy meaning the living. It's to them that's what made sense at that time. It wasn't a problem. As you can see, what you mentioned made sense because it became a problem, as you know, as Islam spread past the Arabian Peninsula. And the famous hadith of Hudayf ibn Liman, when he told Uthman, he told him, hurry up or get ready. There's something serious taking place in Azerbaijan where the people are going to fight each other and split up like the Jews and the Christians did if you don't solve this problem, because people were reciting the Quran differently and they nearly had a fight with one another. In Azerbaijan and southern Russia. And as a result, that's what led the compilation of the Mus'haf that we have today in the Uthmani script. So to differentiate between confusing words like ula'ik and ilayka, because you said there weren't harakat introduced. If you talk to two Arabs, if they write down ula'ik today, they'll write, or ilayka, they'll write with the harakat. But back then they didn't have the harakat. That's why ula'ik was written as alif waw. So inshallah, I'll give you more detail about this later on, inshallah. I'll send it to Brother Asar or the group, and you guys can read this in your own time with the citations, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair.
Ajmain. Any questions as well?
All good, brother. Jazakallah khair.
Ajmain. So here, basically, you got al-hayy wa batha mustaqarrun. When you stop on it, you say it as al-hayy wa bath mustaqarr. and you just stress it and you prolong it for slight of a fraction. That's basically what the chef's saying. Because stopping all will be only one of the doubled stress letters due to the impossibility of pronouncing both of them together with a sukoon. So as we said, you just prolong it a little bit, that's all. As if the letter has been dropped from recitation, which is compensated by moving from the letter before the last to the last one with a certain pressure controlled oral practice. So, basically he's just saying what we ended up pronouncing. The following cases are excluded from stopping on the stressed letter. Okay, so this is exclusion. First, stopping on the stressed noon and the meme. So here he's talking about ولكن جان and في اليم. I'm just going to read because there is no need for nabu in them. Oh, okay. So why do you think the exception here is for the noon and the meme? Well, I should actually ask more accurately, how would you stop at these? You can give it a shot.
Wallahu alam.
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
So here you've got these words of the exception, ولكن, jan, and في اليم. So how would you stop on these? These ones are the exception to the rule. I'll give you a hint. I'll recite them for you. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولكن جان في اليم. What's different in this case? I think I fried everyone's brains today.
I think it's not giving a more. It's giving a more prolonged stop, is it?
I'll let you compare both of them.
Yeah.
I got مستقر ولكن the same length.
Okay, no, it's hard for me to.
So here they're identical. I've done the same thing. The only difference is that the Imam is saying what I've done in this case is not a nabu. Noon and meme are exempt because there is no need for nabu in them. Since the long ghunnas when stopping gives the listener the feeling that this letter should be stressed anyway. Because when you're with these ones, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهِ فِي الْيَمِّ وَلَا تَخَافِ, you're going to do it anyway. Because ghunna, it's the hukum here, it's a different hukum. It's a different chapter. Because here I'm talking about accents. You do this when you stop. This is like a general exception to the rule when it comes to stopping. But here, this is a whole chapter, and this is part of a big chapter of ghunna. When there's a meme sakin or a noon sakin, I'll just tell everybody the same thing, just keep it going. So that's the exception. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, the second now. Here's another exception. You got Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَتَبَّ الْحَقَّ. Is this nab or not? And what is it? Take a guess, it's all good.
Can you just give the first example again, please?
I've got two words. So وَتَبَّتْ يَدَا أَبِي لَهَبٍ وَتَبَّ الْحَقَّ. What's this stop called? If I stop on it, the hukum that I'm stopping on.
قلقلة.
قلقلة, yes. So here, because as we said, Ajid, Qatm, Bakat are the strong letters. They're going to be naturally strong anyway. If I stop on anything from Qutb Jad, then the overriding rule is qalqala. So that's another exception. So if it's a meme or a noon, it's a ghunna. If it's khutub jad and I'm stopping on, it's qalqala. So they're all sakin, but just to keep that in mind. So I'm just going to read it quickly. In the following cases are excluded: stopping on the stressed letter. Stopping on the stressed letter has qalqala in it. We mentioned this before because both letters are apparent in pronunciation, since the first is merged and the second has a qalqala. So there is no need for nabr here. And now, number 2, when pronouncing the stressed waw and ya. So I'll recite it. These are general exceptions. Al-quwwa, qawwamin, sharqiyya, sayyara. Sorry, I'm just showing. Huyyitum. So that's exception as well, obviously. This is the middle of the word. It's pretty obvious what's happening there. When transitioning from a mad letter, the first letter of the stressed one, you got dab, al-haqqa. Well, obviously, I'm not doing a full proper mad here, but I'm just, reading it quickly. Waladdallin. So here, just to kind of like indicate to the listener that after the mad comes a shadda. So these last 2 examples, they're a shadda that's in the middle of the word. Obviously, you don't do nabr in it like that. You just go, you do nabr, but obviously you don't over exaggerate it. Like we did with the stopping. I think it's more obvious with there. Next one, when stopping on a hamza. That's an interesting one. Okay, so I'll give you an example and I'll open the floor for any questions. So here, what's the difference between as-sama and as-sama? Which one has nabr in it?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Like first one, I'll say as-sama, and then as-sama.
Is it the second one?
Yes. Yeah. So here in this case, nabr is perfectly fine. That's what the sheikh means about having a nabr at the end of the mad. So that's what it sounds like when there's a hamza, and I'll give an example of what it sounds like when a shadda comes after it. This is really technical. It gives you a headache. It still gives me a headache, actually, when you're doing your ijaza and whatnot, because you could sometimes subtly bring it up when you least expect it. It's really subtle because in certain situations, when you don't want to pronounce things like a robot. You want to emphasize things like Arabs did. Like, you got a word, for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, you got the word faqasat. You don't want to say, you want to read it as faqasat qulubuhum. So here I'm making a number on faqasat qulubuhum. I don't want to say faqasat qulubuhum. If I say them faqasat like that, faqasat in Arabic means the egg just, opened or cracked. If I say faqasat with emphasis, I'm saying the hearts became hard. You see the difference? I can see a lot of people are mind blown today.
I got a bit lost on that one, Ustad. Sorry about that. So
here,
examples again, please.
So here we're going to talk about one word. You got the importance of nabr. It's really important because if it doesn't get used correctly, it can change the meaning of a word. For example, you got, faqasat qulubu. You read it as faqasat qulubuhum, faqasat qulubuhum. But if I read it as, if I do no nabr and I give everything an equal portion, faqasat qulubuhum. Faqasat means the hearts have cracked. Faqasat qulubuhum. If I say faqasat qulubuhum, and I break it out and I introduce nabr to intentionally slow down or put emphasis on a specific letter, it can change the meaning. You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say at the end of the day, it's a really advanced thing to introduce to Qur'an. If it does have negative implications, if you introduce it to the wrong place, it can effectively change the meaning. But here, we're explaining the different ways of introducing it. And that's why people say, it's kind of like, oh, but this guy's reading beautifully. In I was like, everyone's like, oh, this is really good. It's like, nah, man, it's like there's an art to it. Because if you introduce it to the wrong place, as we can saw, as I gave the example of faqaset and faqaset and faqaset, it can change the meaning. So, it's I hope I didn't blow everyone's mind. I don't expect you to kind of get this, on board today. It can even last through the length of your ijazah as well. It's really technical because it's about like really strict timing. But as you can see, in certain places, it's pretty easy. If you see a shadda, extend it. If you got minas sama, that's perfectly fine. Dabba, you're emphasizing the shadda. So here we're just covering the different cases, So we're not going to really go into advanced side of things. Before we move on to point 5, any questions so far about nabr? All good, folks?
Yes.
Yep.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. Number 5. When dropping the dual alif al-tathniya, or the collective waw al-jama'ah, to avoid the meeting of two letters with sukoon when it's pronounced, it might be confused with the singular. Oh, okay. So here, this is an example of what I said earlier. We need to have nabr because you're reciting as if somebody is writing down. And I've said this quite a lot to people that are doing ijazah prep and whatnot. Think of it: you're reciting the letter, the Quran, to a person that's writing it down, and they're writing down every single harakah. I'm not looking for letters. Letters are secondary. You should already know them by now. I'm looking for the harakat as well. So this is what it sounds like. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm going to read them correctly, and I read them incorrectly. Just give you an example. فلما ذاق الشجرة واستبق الباب وقال الحمد لله. Sorry, I'm trying to. وصالح المؤمنين وصالح المؤمنين دعوا الله ربهما. So دعوا الله. So here, okay, I'll go back. You say ذاق الشجرة. I don't say ذاق الشجرة. I say ذاق الشجرة. And I extend it slightly. ذاق الشجرة. So I don't say ذاق الشجرة. ذاق on its own is implying, one person. If I say ذاق, obviously with the alif at the end, I'm saying there's two people. Like, ذهب and ذهبا. There's a clear difference. So that's what he means about singular and plural. واستبق الباب. You want to extend it slightly. استبق الباب. You want to say استبق الباب. You say استبق الباب because I want to hear the alif extension as well. So I understand, when I say استبق, here when I say استبق, it's talking about Surah Yusuf. They both ran to the door. So by extending it slightly longer, as you can see, I'm preserving the meaning. If I cut it short, I'm changing the meaning. وقال الحمد لله. So here قال, it's not قال. You've heard this a lot. قال قال قال. قال means singular, I said. قال means we said. So same thing with دعوا الله. So that's what the Sheikh means about putting nabr here. Nabr is basically, like we said, is stress for emphasis, and it happens because it's a slight extension of the word. That's what all you're doing. Here, this is an example where nabr is crucial because it preserves the meaning. It's I'd be more stressed out if I'm assessing you and you're getting this one wrong. So I hope that explains it, because I know this mistake, we all go through it through our recitation sometimes. But I hope that's kind of explained point number 5. Is point number 5 clear to everybody now? Like the whole concept of nabr.
Yes, alhamdulillah. Just so normally, if we were to read it just with the rules, if there's a sukoon after qala, we would jump straight to it qalal. But because it's got the extra alif, and that means it's two people, it's qalal. We're adding
Yeah,
it.
so if you're stopping, you say فلما استغفر الله العظيم, let me go back. وقال ذاق. But here, because as you noticed, we got Hamza al-Wasl, we have to link it up if I'm continuing. So ذا فلما ذاق الشجرة استبق الباب وقال الحمد. You see what I mean? I'm doing here, I'm not extending it like a mad. I'm certainly not doing a natural mad. Al-Alameen, I'm not doing that. All I'm doing with nabr is extending it slightly in this case to preserve the meaning. But as you can see, people don't notice this sometimes because when you're reciting continuously, فَلَمَّا ذَاقَ الشَّجَرَةِ, ذَاقَ الشَّجَرَةِ, people sometimes they sneak it in onto the next word, you know what I'm saying? So it's a requirement that you stress this slightly to drag it out. So it's easier to stop on it. ذَاقَ وَاسْتَبَقَ, because you're preserving the meaning of it. But just remember that also holds when you're continuing. Just extend it slightly as well. So I hope I addressed the question. Ajmain, man. All good, brother, so?
Yes, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair.
All good.
I was trying to find the app in Mac as well. I think the app is not in the Mac. That's why I can't log into it from my iPhone anymore.
I'm not surprised, man. Arabs, I think the Muslim world is Microsoft biased. Not
Yeah.
apologizing for that, but
It's okay. I think the no visuals is not helping much, but alhamdulillah, I'm the listening it is very good. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
no, Ajmain, alhamdulillah. Okay. Now this is an interesting one. Now we're getting into specifics of tariqah. So I'm not gonna try to fry your brains too much. This word, yabsut, in Arabic. Now it's interesting because the Arabs, and you hear this with different qira'at. You got sirata and sirata with a sin and a sad. So here I'll read. There's two particular verbs in Arabic, saytara and basata. Some Arabs make the letter sin in these verbs heavy because it's near the closed elevated letter or harf al-isti'la, which is the top. So they say basata and saytara. So some people, and it happens with different qira'at. Best example you've got is forget about Hafs right now. We're talking Shu'bah as well. Shu'bah and Hafs came from Asim. They pronounce it differently, basically because of the environment. So in accordance with the accent of these tribes, 4 such words in the Holy Quran were written with a sad. So this is extremely critical, especially if you're doing Ijaz and Hafs and Asim, because you need to differentiate between using a sad and a sin, because this can easily land you, I'm not saying in a different tariqah, but it can even change your riwayah as well. Because Shu'bah, as in Surah Al-Baqarah, as we know, he read it with a sad, strictly. But obviously, Imam Hafs had different options, depending which tariqah he had. Because Hafs came from 2 tariqahs, we said. We got tariqah Shatbiyya and Taybat al-Nashr. Shu'bah read it with a sad. Anyways, what this book tries to say is that different people read it with a sad and a sin. What you need to know, because now you're getting at the technicality of Hafs. Hafs recited this, and you have to look out for 4 words in the whole Quran. If you memorize them, you're sussed. Some reciters reported them with a sin based on their origin, and others was a sad. So as to follow the script of the Quran in accordance to the accent of those tribes. The school of thought of Hafs, because that's what we're doing the course on, right? From Asim, by the way of Ash-Shatibiyyah, which is what every single person has to read, whether you're in the madrasa or doing a first ijazah and Shatibiyyah. You have to go through that path before you get the license to switch between. So by the way of Shatibiyyah is as follows. The words in Surah Al-Baqarah. Here we go. So here is written it. And زادكم في خلقي بسطة. So here, basta, sorry, or sin. I've supported these two words with a sin only. So this is what it sounds like. It's written in the Quran as with a sad, as we said, but here you say it correctly. Wallahu yaqbidu wa yabsutu. And basta, not basta, basta in Surah Al-Araf. So here has supported these two words with a sin in accordance to the rule of Shatibiyyah. The word in Surah Tur, al-musaytirun, is read with sad and sin, but reading it with sad is more preferable. Or here says more known, but it's more preferable. I'm not going to dwell on the details again. This thing is going to give you a serious headache. We're getting into the technicalities, but as you know, you've got two options, but it's preferred with the sad. The word bimusaytir, Ghashia, which a lot of us have already memorized, is the word with a sad. So you say it as لست عليهم بمسيطر. Once you do your other ijazat, you know the technicalities of other turuq, you can switch between them. لست عليهم بمسيطر with a C. That's basically it. Any questions about sad and sin in the four positions of Hafs? All seem to be pretty sweet. All right, guys, I'll just keep, sorry, my thing crashed, so we'll just keep reading. You know, if you have any questions, just stop me whenever. Oh, yes, we said this at the beginning of class, Alif Lam Mim. So you can read it as, I'm not going to dwell on it too much. By connecting the words Alif Lam Mim, Allah, two letters with a sukoon meet. The first is Mim, and I'll skip this intentionally. We've already explained this in detail. What I'm trying to say, the bottom line is at the end of the day, you can say it as Alif Lam Mim, Mim. Here I'm saying Alif Lam. Lam is extended 6 harakat, Mim is extended 6. Just stop with qat' and then continue. Or you can go Alif Lam Mim Allah without extending it 6 harakat. That's basically it. It is permissible to pronounce, so to prevent the meeting of the two letters of sukoon, we put fatha. So you pronounce with a fatha if you continue. Then it's permissible to pronounce the elongated ya, in which the meme in two ways. The first is lengthened 6 harakat, which we mentioned. And the second to shorten the 2 counts for the absence of the, because now, obviously, there is no 2 sukoons. You just added a fatha. So that's an exception as well when you're continuing in Surah Al-Imran. Next up. Ta'manna. Oh, God. Here we go. You guys are ready for this one? Because I'm going to have to turn the camera on.
Bismillah.
Ya Allah, Bismillah. Okay. Let me just. Oh, sweet. Okay. Let me know if you're having any technical issues. Bismillah. You there?
Yep, here, alhamdulillah.
Okay. This happens once in Surah Yusuf, and it's called the Shman. And it happens once in the whole of recitation of Hafs, which alhamdulillah makes your life extremely easy, especially for these people doing Hafs, which is why it tends to be a favorite. So what's the Shman? I'm just going to read it first and show you how it is. Yes, and the words, the rule of Ta'manna in Surah Yusuf. The words of Almighty Allah, مَا لَكَ لَا تَأْمَنَّ عَلَى يُوسُف. Its origins is تَأْمَنُنَا, which is a present tense verb with a dhamma. So it's pronounced as تَأْمَنُنَا. It was seen as too heavy to pronounce, 3 vowel letters with gunna, which was avoided by one of the 2 following ways. You got the round and ishmam, which is keeping the dhamma. So here basically you pronounce it with the round and lowering its second sound in a haste. So here, what's round? Round basically, I'm not going to get too technical on you with this one. It's like having a dhamma fatha kasra, yeah? But what you do intentionally is you try to pronounce a dhamma fatha kasra at a 30%. So rather than going ma, go ma. Just giving a simple example. So here in this case, Rome, I'll say ما لك لا تأمننا استغفر الله العظيم ما لك لا تأمننا على يوسف ما لك لا تأمننا على يوسف. I'm really bad at this, I have to admit, because that's how I did it, not how I did it. But basically, ما لك لا تأمننا على يوسف. I need to practice on my own, to be honest. The other person is, because what we're trying to do is like can't and cannot. So when I say can't, and I put an apostrophe, that's exactly what we're doing here. ما لك لا تأمننا على يوسف. استغفر الله. ما لك لا تأمننا على يوسف. That's how I'm reading. لا إله إلا الله. I still need to practice on this one. But here I'm saying it at manuna. I'm trying to get that 30% haraka with the wrong. So that's what the sheikh means, lowering its sound with a haste compared to that of its neighboring letters. So it's like a dhamma, but it's not 100% dhamma. The other option, ishmam. Ishmam here, I'll say, ما لك لا تأمنا على يوسف. ما لك لا تأمنا على يوسف. So rather than saying ما لك لا تأمنا, I'll say ما لك لا تأمنا على يوسف. So I bring my lips out after I say it. Does that make sense? Ishmam.
Yeah, it does. Yep. Jazakallah khair.
But you can see, I'll give you an example of stopping on Ishmam. Or like stopping on wrong, for example. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. So I can stop on it. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. نستعين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. So here what I'm doing intentionally is I'm trying to lower, it's a dhamma, but I'm not pronouncing a full dhamma. I'm not saying إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط. I'm saying إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. You see how the last haraka is a bit lower in volume?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I can, yep.
So that's home. This is what Ishmam looks like. That's why I have to have the camera on. Because even with the expanded Shatibiya, I do the same thing. Stopping with Ishmam sounds like this. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. You see what I've done there?
Yep.
So that's how you stop with Ishmam. This lip action happens after the incident. That's what the key thing to remember. ما لك لا تأمنا على يوسف. What I'm doing effectively is I'm flavoring the letter with a dhamma. That's what I'm doing. I'm pronouncing a letter, but I'm giving it a slight, it's like adding a little bit of sugar to your drink. You see what I mean?
Yes. Is it supposed to be audible or not?
With Ishmam, no. With Rome, yes, it's audible, but the baseline frequency is supposed to be lower than all the other harakat. From my understanding, Sheikh Khurayyim over in Egypt right now, one of the head of the board of printing the Masahif, specifically says it has to be 30%. But it's really difficult to achieve. A lot of people try to avoid it, and most people, especially in Tawih, they just make wasl. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Because otherwise you have to keep dropping your frequency. You know what I mean? So it's got its purposes, but we just teach it in Hafs specifically. We teach it for people for the sake of knowing about it. You know it exists. You know what it gets used for, but it's like a tool. You choose to use it or not. But in Ijaza specifically, you have to know, especially in the highest Ijaza, you need to differentiate between them, and you have to execute it correctly with Surah Yusuf, depending on whatever you choose. ما لك لا تأمنا على يوسف. So at least if you say it, that's it. But you know the reason behind it, inshallah.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair. And those two options are allowed in Hafs.
Hafs by way of Shatibiya, yes.
Shatibiya.
So yeah, alhamdulillah. So
and
that's
on
basically
Asim,
that.
what options are they there? I mean, yeah, sorry.
I mean, technically speaking, I haven't explored it that much. I mean, there should be. I'm guessing it should be technically the same because they're getting it from Hassan. But as far as knowing which way is preferred, that's actually a good question. I'm not really too qualified to speak on that one. I still need to finish my ijaza when I ask them to let you know. But
No
yeah,
problem, Jazakallah khair.
usually they'll let you know. Like what happens is that, like for example, we gave about Hafs by way of Shatibiya in a specific place because of narrations. He preferred the side over a scene. So he tends to kind of specifically say it. Same thing with Shu'bah as well. So it's as far as I'm concerned, it's not really seen as a big deal. I might be incorrect, but like I said, I haven't done my ijaza and Shu'bah at that level yet. But it's not seen necessarily as a big deal because that's the keyword we look out for. In other qira'at, however, as we've done maybe with Khalaf al-Bazar or Khalaf al-Ashir, it tends to be more frequent. So probably there is something, I'm not saying there's a different rule, but from the usuli qira'ah perspective of Khalaf, they do it with a sad. So say, وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا. So here, every time the sad comes, in this specific scenario, they do it. You see what I mean? So it's it depends on the qira'ah as well. So that's why I'm available to help out. But you can see that's why, mashallah, Hafs is really easy. It's got these specific places. You just memorize them and it makes your life easy, you know. Other places, it's got, could be anything. You got waqf al-hamza, you got imala, you got anything. So it's, but it's kind of good because if you get really established, as I said, in Hafs, you get your ijaza. You learn about the usul and the furu'ah. It really sets you up for other qira'at. So it's not about, you know, just jumping and getting ijaza and getting certified. You need to know usul before you know the furu'ah. But if your usul are 100% and your pronunciation of the letters is 100% good, it's going to make it easier to pick up other qira'at, inshallah. Inshallah, Allah Kareem. Any questions about the Ishmam?
Not from me, Jazakallah khairan. It's explained nicely.
Man. That's good. So normally, scholars of vowels, علماء الضبط here, they call them scholars of vowels or harakat. They visualize it either by a red dot or a diamond. That's how it happens. You pick it up. And it happens before the noon, just to kind of give you a heads up in order to indicate the shmam. And it's just got a visual representation in the book. Oh, God. Yes, subhanAllah. I hope you're still alive by the end of this, man. I think we'll stop here today. Oh, I'll just try to explain this. I don't know if I should attempt it today. What I'll do, Yalla, bismillah. When joining Hafs, reading the words, فما بسم الله الرحمن فما آتاني الله خير مما آتاكم. This is سورة النمل. بياء مفتوحة في آخره وصلا. Here basically with a fatha on the ya and the ending on آتاني. When stopping, there's two ways of stopping. Here, this is a specific type of waqf that you need to stop on perhaps, if you ever stop on it. If you choose to stop, just remember that. If you can't handle this, by all means, I do understand that. You know, just continue your recitation and make wasl. So here the first option, keep the letter ya with a sukoon. فما آتاني. Oh, sorry. Astaghfirullah azim. So the first option here, he's saying, keep the letter ya with a sukoon. فما آتان. Omitting it and stopping on the noon by sukoon or roam. So here you got two options. فما آتان. So here you keep the ya. And the other option is فما آتاني. فما آتاني. So here, that's when I stop with roam. I don't say فما آتاني. I say آتاني, and I obviously make a gentle kasra at the end. That's if I stop on it. Any questions?
Sorry, I'm not quite following. Sorry, Ustad.
Astaghfirullah azim. I actually need to revise this, to be honest. I'm getting doubts about myself. This is actually really good. Again, this is good to kind of know. إثبات الياء الساكنة. فما آتاني. And then you got this is stopping with the wrong. What I'll do is I'll provide you with more examples. I do apologize on this one. I'm not going to try to overburden your brain. Reason being is that when you continue it, you say فما آتاني الله. So here, obviously, you can stop on فما آتان or فما آتاني with the small sukoon. But what I'll do is I'll try to provide a better example for next week. How about that?
Yes, Jazakallah khair. And it does make sense. So just the examples would be beneficial, but with the ya sukoon, we have another option basically.
Yes. And what I'm trying to do is, I do apologize. Try to pronounce it فما آتان and stop on it with a sukoon, not آتان. Just that's the number one thing to remember. So stop on it with a sukoon, آتان and آتان, فما آتاني. See what I mean? So it's really difficult because you're stopping on a ya, but a silent ya obviously is not really there. Because the ya, it's آتانية with a fatha.
فهمت. Jazakallah khair.
I have to double check on this one. I'll seriously have to get back to you. This is definitely a big mistake on my behalf and lack of preparation. I do apologize. But yeah, like I said, you've always have the option of doing what's فما آتاني الله. Yep. So I'll get back to you on that one. Next up, we got ضعفا and ضعفا. Yes. And source the room. Hafs reported. اللهم صل على محمد. روى حفص كلمتي ضعف وضعفا. So he reported the words ضعفا and ضعف. الله الذي خلقكم من ضعف ثم جعل بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل بعد ضعف قوة ضعف وشيبة. So that's what the ayah. So here, what we're basically trying to say is the word has a ضاد بفتح الضاد وضمها. So here what we're trying to do in Surah Al-Rum, it's only one line, ayah 45. Oh, sorry, 54. So rather than saying ضعف, الله الذي خلقكم من ضعف ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل من بعد قوة ضعفا وشيبة. You read it as الله الذي خلقكم من ضعف ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل من بعد قوة ضعفا وشيبة. What I'm trying to say is that in the recitation of Hafs, you have, and by the way of Shatibiyyah, you have two options. These words have been vowelized, and they've been written specifically with fatha. And the way of reading them with a dhamma has been indicated at the end of the Quran and the points of attention. So basically, to make it easier for a guy's recitation, we can only put one harakah on one letter. So by way of writing the mushaf with harakat, as you mentioned quite beautifully, there wasn't fatha or dhamma, which was the Uthmani script. So the Uthmani script and your mushaf, I've seen masahif with dhamma as well. What we tell people is, look, the standardized way of the Arabic print of the mushaf is we write it with a fatha, but once you do ijaza, we tell the qari that it can be pronounced with dhamma as well. And that is a variation, and it's very rare in the recitation of Hafs, where you can read it twice in different ways. Usually, if something like this happens, it's because it's so big, it's a difference in riwayah. Example of this, ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم المشرق المغرب. There's birra. Birra is done by Shu'bah. If you're reciting Shu'bah. ليس البر, happens with Hafs. So we go, different harakat, Hafs, that happens. But here, mashallah, in this specific situation, Hafs can read it two ways. That's what I'm trying to hint at. We'll leave it here for today. I think that's enough brain frying activities for everybody.
Jazakallah khairan, brother. So yeah, mashallah. Gonna need to. I'll revise that before next week. Jazakallah khairan and stuff.
Mate, you're gonna sleep well tonight. That's for sure, bro.
Definitely.
The reason I'm getting doubts now, which has freaked the heck out of me, because what I think is when you start doing usul qiraat, it can happen again with other recitations because there's different rules for different qiraat. So now I'm like going, you start falling back on what you've done for your ijaz. It's going, I already asked for ma ataniya, and I'm going, oh God, which is which now? So I'm going to double check, go back to my textbook as I should have before prepared for the lecture, and listen to it so I make sure I pronounce it correctly. And hopefully it'll be easier to understand. But any questions so far, because mashallah, we're getting, like I said, we're nearly done, man. We're getting through the nitty gritty of Hafs. And this is basically it, it's once you know these furush, become a Hafs master, inshallah.
No, Jazakallah khairan. I must run, Ustad, but if I do have any questions, I'll pop them over the WhatsApp, inshallah.
Teslam, man. Jazakumullah khair, guys. I'll see you in touch. We'll be in touch, inshallah. Subhanaka bihamdik. Jazakallah khair. So.
Wa alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.